Hello and welcome back to All About Russia. My name's Andrew and today we were discussing the Astrakhan Oblast. The Astrakhan Oblast is located in the south of Russia along the Caspian Sea. It is part of the Southern Federal District and part of the Volga economic region. It shares borders with the Volgograd Oblast to the north, the Republic of Kalmykia to the west, and has the Caspian Sea as its southern border. It is over 18,000 square miles in size, making it the 54th largest federal district within the Russian Federation. That also makes it larger than the country of Slovakia. The oblast also boasts a population of over 1 million people as of the 2010 census and is on Samara time. The bulk of the oblast is steppe turning into desert, particularly the Rin sands in the northeast of the oblast. Forests make up just about 2% of the oblast. Agriculture as of 2010 makes up 1.5% of the oblast. However, as the economic situation has improved since that time, that figure may well be larger. The oblast is actually one of the warmest places in Russia, with in the summer temperatures averaging out at 30 degrees Celsius, whereas in winter they only tend to fall to -3. The Volga River flows through the oblast and goes into the Caspian Sea. In the autumn and winter, with flooding from the River Volga, areas that are normally arid become rejuvenated with water and can become marshland. This in turn has led certain areas to become a conservation area for wildlife. In fact, the oblast has over 50 areas of conservation for wildlife and fauna. However, this does not total a huge amount, and it's only 1.5 square miles of permanent conservation area. An interesting point is that due to the warm weather and regular flooding, the oblast is home to quite a large population of mosquitoes and locusts who can rain havoc during the summer months. The flag of the oblast is an azure background, representing peace. It has a jewelled mitra, a form of headdress used in Orthodox Christian ceremonies, in the centre, signifying the inclusion of the oblast into the history of Russia and their connection with Christianity. Below that is a scimitar to signify the bravery and military history of the people of the region. This flag was adopted by the State Duma on the 13th of December 2001. The oblast is split into 11 administrative districts, with the capital being of course Astrakhan itself, which has by far the largest concentration of people. The oblast also features the closed city of Znamensk, which in Soviet times was a base for rocket technology development. Strangely, there have been several reports by locals of seeing strange UFO-esque shapes in the night sky. This has led to the nearby rocket testing center of Kapustin Yar being dubbed the Roswell of Russia. Humans have been in the area since at least the Neolithic era. We have evidence for this in monuments found near the village of Siroglazovo. This culture group existed at a time when the area was far more green and lush than it is today. Scientists believe some catastrophe must have befallen the region, which led to the desertification of the area as we know it today. The first written mention of the area comes from, no, it's not the Chinese, it's the Byzantines, who lived in the Eastern Roman Empire in the 7th century. The area that we now know as the Astrakhan Oblast had been known to both the Greeks and the Persians, but they had just lumped it as part of Greater Dalmatia. The Byzantines were the first to mention the Astrakhan Oblast region in particular, citing it as the homeland of the Khazars, a Turkic-speaking Jewish people who inhabited the Volga region. Their capital, Ityl, was supposedly near where Astrakhan itself lies today. However, excavation has not been able to confirm this. There is some debate in the historical community about who the Khazars actually were. Some people thinking they were simply the Sarmatians under new leadership, some saying they were remnants of the Huns, some saying they were a lost tribe of Israel, and pretty much everything in between. What is known is that the Khazar state became very wealthy due to its unique location, able to trade both across the Caspian and with the wider Islamic world. This theme of trans-Caspian trade is something that will pop up repeatedly throughout the area's history. Conflict with Arab invaders coming across the Caucasus Mountains to the south, as well as dealing with nomadic invaders from the east such as the Hungarians and Pechenegs, as well as Slavic princes to the west, all weakened the Khazar state. This was evident in 965 AD, when the Russian prince Sviatoslav of Kiev was able to attack and destroy Isil, also destroying Khazar power in that region. From the middle of the 10th century, Kuman and Kipchak nomadic horsemen migrated into the area, either absorbing or destroying the Khazars who remained there. The Astrakhan Oblast remained under their control until the Mongol invasion in 1222. 5 years later, with Genghis Khan's death and the division of the Mongol Empire, the area of the Astrakhan Oblast fell into the Golden Horde. Interestingly, due to disputes between the various Mongol empires, trade across the Caspian actually declined at this point, and more emphasis was made on the overland routes coming from Central Asia and across the Caucasus Mountains. Despite the decline of Trans-Caspian trade, the area still flourished with its overland routes, which led to an influx of scholars, merchants, and tradesmen from across the Islamic world. One visitor in particular was Ibn Battuta, the famous Muslim explorer and scholar. In his visit, he refers to the city as Hashtarkan, which itself was a corruption of Haji Taran. This, in the Tartar language, simply meant the great Khan who has completed the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. And that's where the current name of Astrakhan comes from. Astrakhan, or Hashtarkan as it was called then, was the autumn residence of the Khan of the Golden Horde and is believed to be found by Khan Burke. He was the first Muslim Khan of the Golden Horde, and from that point Islam can be seen solidifying in the region. We can only speculate how it was spread. It may well have already had a following given the amount of people who had moved to the area, or possibly people converted like they did in the Adiga video from the nobility trickling downward. The city of Hashtarkan was a very wealthy city with its caravans and even larger slave market, but in turn that also made it a very tempting target. In 1395 the city was sacked by Tamerlane. By the 15th century, civil war and unrest had started to tear the Golden Horde apart. From this, in 1466, the Astrakhan Khanate arose under Mahmud ibn Kuchuk, who was himself a dependent of the Great Horde. Further infighting amongst the Mongols led to the Astrakhan Khanate separating entirely and becoming wealthy as a point of trade for Central Asian goods and particularly slaves. The Russians had known about Hashtarkan since its foundation, as it was one of the largest slaving stations on the Volga. However, the Russians truly appear on the scene in 1532, oddly enough as a stabilising force. Factions from the court of the then Khan of the Astrakhan Khanate, Khan Akubek, had approached Ivan the Terrible asking for assistance in keeping out influence from the Crimean and Nogai Khanates who were looking to influence the secession of the Astrakhan Khanate. This backfired a tiny bit, as Russian arms then put Dervish Ali, who was an exile living in Russia with claims to the Khanate, onto the throne and then forced to pay tribute to Moscow. However, he didn't want to pay this tribute to Moscow, so decided not to. The Russians sent a small force to coerce Dervish to pay his tribute, which he mistook as the vanguard of a much larger Russian force, and fled the city. This led to the small Russian force that was sent to actually occupy the city. In 1556, the Astrakhan Khanate was officially absorbed into the Russian Empire. 2 years later, when construction of the Kremlin in Astrakhan was started, is generally considered the founding of that city as we know it today. However, the taking of Astrakhan by the Russians made it something of an apple of discord, not only with the Crimeans and Nogai Tatars, but also with the Persians and the Ottomans. The reason for this is Astrakhan was in a perfect location to be a springboard for any assaults into the Caucasus, across the Caspian into Persia, or into Central Asia. In 1586, attempts were made by the Ottomans to capture the area, but they were defeated by Russian forces as well as Circassian banditry. Astrakhan became an economic powerhouse, able to trade goods across the Caspian as well as into Central Asia, and of course domestic produce flowing down the Volga available for export. Visitors in the 17th century to the city cited it as incredibly cosmopolitan. Here you could find Indian merchants, Persians and Armenians all trading with Nogai and Kipchak nomads from the steppe, as well as Tatars, Russians, Poles and a multitude of other nationalities, all residing there either permanently or semi-permanently, all to trade. The beginning of the 17th century saw great discord in Russia, and particularly in the Astrakhan region. Due to its distance from the capital, the main source of power, and being on the fringes of the empire, it became a hotbed for rebellion. Revolts in 1606 under the boyar Ivan Bolotnikov, in 1670 under the Cossack leader Stepan Razin, and in 1705 under the merchant Yakov Nosov, saw great discord in the region, within all three revolts local inhabitants welcoming the rebels. The threat of rebellion in the region caused Peter the Great to amalgamate the region into the Kazan province in 1708. 2 years later, the Assumption Cathedral was completed in Astrakhan, signifying the end of the unrest. The Astrakhan province continued to grow as more imperial authority was exercised on the area. However, this did have a drawback, as chafing under this oppressive rule, the nearby Kalmyk horde, who inhabited the steppes, fled the area completely. Under Catherine the Great, the Astrakhan province was incorporated into the Caucasian Viceregency in 1785. This was dissembled in 1796, with the Astrakhan province re-emerging, but with all the territory of the Caucasian Viceregency. This lasted up until 1832, when at that point the Caucasian holdings separated from the Astrakhan province. Throughout the 19th century, the Astrakhan province was a region where expeditions across the Caspian or further east into Central Asia were mounted from. With the start of the 20th century, the Astrakhan province was doing extremely well for itself. It was extremely cosmopolitan. Of the 122,000 residents of the city of Astrakhan, with a multitude of nationalities, there were prominent communities of both Armenians and Jews. Oil, which had been discovered in the Caspian, was being exported across the rest of Russia, with the fishing and agricultural industries booming as well. With the start of the First World War, many residents of the Astrakhan province signed up with the army, fighting primarily in the Caucasian front. However, as the war turned against them, so did the mood in the cities. With the October Revolution in 1917, fierce fighting broke out between pro and anti-Bolshevik forces in the city and across the oblast. By February 1918, the Bolshevik forces had won out and formed a Soviet. The leader of the Astrakhan Cossacks, Noyon Tundutov, left with his forces towards the Don, hoping to regroup and eventually come back and liberate the area. Even with official fighting forces having left the area, all was not quiet. In March 1919, workers who were unhappy with the economic situation in the oblast peacefully demonstrated but were shot at by Soviet forces, resulting in a massacre of several thousand over a few days. Perhaps spurred on by news of this outrage, white forces entered the oblast in the summer of 1919. Fierce fighting took place on the outskirts of Astrakhan itself, and the Bolshevik forces again won out, forcing the white forces to retreat back toward the Crimea. From this point onwards, other than sporadic guerrilla actions, there would be complete Soviet domination of the area. The Civil War and war communism had ravaged the region, and with the start of 1920, famine was looming. A huge push was taken by the Soviet forces to rebuild the fishing industries famous in the Astrakhan region, but unfortunately they did not quite suffice, and the area was affected by the great famines of 1920 and 1922. From 1920, Astrakhan went through some very peculiar administrative changes. In 1920, it was the capital of the Kalmyk Autonomous Oblast. 8 years later, it was transferred, along with the rest of the oblast, to the Lower Volga Krai. A few years later, in 1934, it was incorporated as part of the Stalingrad Oblast. Also of note, in 1932, the Astrakhan State University was founded. When the Second World War began and Nazi Germany invaded Russia, some of the fiercest fighting was around Stalingrad, not far from Astrakhan Oblast. Whilst Nazi troops did not enter the city, it was heavily bombed by the Luftwaffe, as it was a transit point for both men and supplies going towards the Stalingrad front. Thousands of residents took up arms and joined the defence of Stalingrad. In addition to this, on the Kalmyk steppe, probing attacks by Nazi armoured cars were not uncommon. Strangely enough, it's during this life or death struggle that Soviet authorities decided to separate the Astrakhan province from the Volgograd Oblast in 1943, finally establishing the Astrakhan Oblast as we know it today. At the end of the Second World War, like much of Russia, the region required investment and redevelopment. The oblast had suffered not only from bombs, but from bullets, and chronic manpower shortages were a recurrent issue throughout the 40s and 50s. Troops returning from the front, as well as Khrushchev's Virgin Land schemes, helped to alleviate this somewhat with a rebuilding of the fishing and agrarian industries. Specialists were brought in to help extract oil from the Caspian. All these things combined, along with investment, helped create a modern Soviet city in Astrakhan. Energy was extracted from the Volga River, and the city continued its long tradition of being a melting pot of many nationalities in support of the industries emerging there. However, as the oblast grew, the shortage of electricity became a recurrent problem, and alongside other economic woes of the Soviet period, the region began to stagnate in the 1980s. The fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s led to a special hardship in the region, as the subsidies that had been given for fishing suddenly stopped, leaving many fishermen unemployed. Fortunately, the modern oblast is in much better shape today than it was in the 90s, monopolising on its unique position on the Caspian. The present city of Astrakhan remains true to its history, being a hub for commerce for people from across Central Asia as well as the Caspian Basin. There was talk in 2010 of merging the Astrakhan Oblast with the Volgograd Oblast, but nothing has happened so far. The modern city of Astrakhan is a thriving metropolis, doing very well from its unique position on the Caspian. Astrakhan Oblast has a strong economy. In 2006, it produced nearly 340 million rubles in gross regional output. The ring sands in the northeast of the oblast contain the Astrakhanskoye gas fields, which have an estimated 2.9 trillion cubic meters of gas, making it the 9th largest gas deposit in Russia. Gas and oil extraction and supply make up large parts of the economy, with textiles making up a much smaller percentage in comparison. Agricultural output, while small compared to other parts of Russia, is very efficient. The warm climate allows for 2 crops of vegetables such as potatoes and rice, as well as fruits such as melons and oranges to be grown in the oblast. Additionally, since the fall of the Soviet Union, there's been a greater effort to rebuild the fishing industry in the region. Today, the oblast has over 100 different fish farming enterprises and many more on the way. The oblast also has the distinction of being one of the few places in Russia where there is a regular surplus of livestock produced. One of the largest industries in Astrakhan is shipbuilding, with many domestic fishing vessels being produced there. Astrakhan is also the home base for the Caspian Flotilla, who ply the waters of the Caspian Sea. As of the 2010 census, the oblast is home to over 1 million people, which is roughly the same as the population back in 2002. The city of Astrakhan also boasts a population of over 500,000 itself. Russians make up the majority of the oblast at 67%, with the next largest minorities being Khazars at 16%, Tatars at 6%, with very small splatterings of Ukrainians, Azerbaijanis, Nogais and Chechens. Interestingly, Astrakhan has one of the heaviest concentrations of Kazakhs in all of Russia. The birth rate in the oblast is 1.76 children per woman, which is higher than the national average. As of the 2012 survey, over half of the oblast inhabitants were Christians, with the majority of them being Russian Orthodox. Other Orthodox faiths, as well as Catholicism, make up the rest. Those who are spiritual but not religious make up over 15%, with Islam being the next largest denomination at nearly the same percentage. Atheism has a small following at around 5%, with a few adherents to the old Slavic faith of Rodnoveri at around 2%. Nearly a tenth of all people did not give an answer. Oddly, the unemployment rate in the oblast is higher than the national average. Drug abuse is far lower in the oblast than in other parts of Russia, with only 9.8 people per 100,000 having a drug addiction. Alcoholism is slightly higher in the oblast, however, than in the rest of Russia, coming in at 113 people per 100,000 suffering from alcoholism. The governor of the oblast is Alexander Alexandrovich Zhirkin, who has been the governor of the oblast since 2004. He is, of course, a member of the United Russia Party, and in 2004 won with over half full votes. he won again in 2014 for over 3/4 of all the votes. If that math is causing you to scratch your head, that's because when his powers ended from his first term in office in 2009, the State Duma, under direction from President Dmitry Medvedev, encouraged him to stay in power for another 5 years with their authority. He is of course Russian and was born in the area. Interestingly, he was directly involved in the defence against a communist coup in 1991 against Boris Yeltsin and received a medal from him for these actions. This is of particular interest because the Astrakhan Oblast was traditionally in the Red Belt, those areas that continued to vote for the Communist Party after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Astrakhan Oblast is an incredible part of Russia where East meets West in a spirit of trade and friendship. Embellished with huge natural resources as well as a fantastic location on the Caspian, it continues to grow and is one of the most important settlements on the Caspian, if not in the whole of Russia itself. Thank you for watching. That's the end of the federal subjects that begin with A. If you've enjoyed watching so far, please give us a like and a subscribe. We'll be putting out more videos about not only the federal subjects but also the people and culture of Russia as well. Truly all about Russia. My name is Andrew and up next will be Bashkortostan Republic. Baka.